My special guest is Ian Catling.
Okay, now it starts.
Oh, now we're starting. Okay.
Sorry.
Well,
Tatlo.
let's do this again. Fama'kilo, Pachot Mu with Raf and Pinko. And special guest Ian Catling. Today is the 2nd of March 2024. Half a day, Mes Chamorro. We're going to be covering archaeology, artifacts, and the like. And TomTom Consultants.
TomTom Consultants. So, after working for GovQuam, I noticed that there is a definite lack of indigenous representation when it comes to writing our own history. So, TomTom Consultants was created with empowering the indigenous populations, not just locally. Hopefully, we'll have a global expansion. But empowering the indigenous populations to get those stamps. This is a stamp driven world that we live in right now. We need to do it, get those stamps, and that way we can get indigenous representation, on the jobs, in the job sites. By stamps, I mean by, certifications,
Oh, okay. I see what you mean.
certificates.
So TomTom Consultants. I've done some work with you guys. From my perspective, you guys. Well, I'm concerned more. On my personal level, I'm concerned more about making sure that the archaeological data is recovered completely and correctly, and without any any problems with the recovery process
Or any misunderstandings, which is exactly right. That's what we would like to dispel any fears of, because as it's currently done, outsiders, wherever you're from, if you're from an indigenous population, are the ones coming in and doing all of this work on your own people, in which your input, insight may be credited, not credited, honored, not honored. We have no control over that. And so the company, the TomTom Consultants, was created so that way we would take that agency back, to be able to do that.
A lot of times, see, one of the things we covered earlier in the pre-recorded version of this show, and by the way, we did that with the first episode. We had a pre-recorded version, and then we went live. So this is a live version, right? See?
Yeah.
We're live. Okay. So try to tune into that. We kind of went over the importance of the archaeological data and I think it there right now there's a disconnect with the community. Well, both the business community and the local community. I don't want to separate the two, but in this sense, it has to be separated because the business community is the one that's investing in the land. Investing in the land, there's a lot of costs involved, and that's understood. I even did a documentary, where a cousin of mine, he had to, he had to do an archaeological survey. I told him, hey, I'm working on something. This was when I was working on my nephew, DJ Pinko, with Area 51, his film production. We covered this archaeological site in Pago Bay. They were building a house, and my cousin was really disgruntled at the fact that he had to pay upwards of $15,000 on top of his costs
easily
to build his home easily, and I was trying to explain to him. Well, identify with him on his frustration, but at the same time, explain to him and explain to my viewers the importance of the information. You know, this benefits us all in the long run. You know, what information we've gathered from here, there, and the other place, and then we put it all together, and we, you know, and then we have a larger picture of what Guam looked like back then, you know.
With the issue though with the homeowner is it feels like you're being stuffed in a crucible, and the front is being closed in on you. Because what happens when archaeology is required, right? So that's typical. Let's just take a typical homeowner as an example. So you apply for a loan, right? Unless you have $500,000 you're sitting on, you're going to go through the same processes that we all go through. You're going to go apply for a loan from the bank. So the bank approves of this loan.
But they don't cover the archaeological.
They don't cover the archaeology. No bank does. No, there's no.
That's messed up.
Well,
that doesn't make any sense.
That's the modernization of the law that needs to happen that we were talking about in the previous.
This is information that's going to fill our history books.
That's going to fill the history books. So the banks.
So, well, here, okay. Here's my next question: is who's in charge of updating those history books? And why aren't they updating those history books?
Well, the history books in terms of the archaeological record is, if the system is working well, then it's constantly being updated with every new dig, every new project that happens in which something is found. You know, it's part and parcel of the job of the archaeologist to contribute to the archaeological record as opposed to just say this was here and that is that. Right, they're supposed to figure things out, uncover things, right? So it's CSI, right, that they're having to do, and so they have various methods that they employ to be able to do that, but all methods are expensive. But just back to the point, the friend that was having to deal with this and what homeowners have to deal with is there is a window that the bank can approve of the loan. Right. So if you're a new homeowner and you're applying for permits to get the project underway, if you're going through the permitting process, if the permitting process takes too long, then you are in default of the time frame that the bank gives you in order to sign off on the paperwork. So that means that for the homeowner, you lose it, right? You lose the home loan. Then you have to reapply. But when you reapply, because you lost the initial home loan, now your credit score goes down. So you go and reapply again, you may not get the loan.
You're right, yeah.
And so when we
doesn't make any sense because, see, now, I mean, if your property hypothetically is sitting on some breakthrough archaeological data, you know?
That's correct.
The value of your property outweighs what the bank thinks it's worth.
But before we get there, like let's say,
but I mean, how would you find that out? How would you find that out?
Well,
how could you prove it?
Well, you find that out through the process. As painful as it is, as you're going through the process, you find it out, right? And so in that situation, there is a land swap that's allowed by the government, and it does happen every once in a while.
Yeah, but people don't want to swap their lands. That's why some, and I'm not pointing out any names. I don't know no names. All I know is I hear about it. You know, like it gets to the point where people hide their laddie stones, you know, in their backyards because they don't want their property getting condemned or taken by the government as a historical landmark. Or anything like that, because that complicates the situation.
Well, they wouldn't do that in that kind of a sense. They wouldn't take it for those reasons. But what the government is required to do, if it does find that there are things on there of great value to the community as a whole, is compensation, right? And so they can compensate you for it, but those types of compensation packages haven't been solidified. They haven't even been established. There's nothing there. There's no.
I roll my eyes. I roll my eyes for a reason.
There's no metric there for this level of compensation.
There's
no
like
funding
compensation.
for it.
You kidding me? You know they you know
there's no funding for it.
That's like when it's like ordering. I want a fresh lechon for my birthday, and it's like 12,000 pesos, but you're paying for what it is when it's a giant ass pig.
And so with the way that the law is written in Chapter 76, Guam Code Annotated, it states that all historic properties are properties of the people of Guam. And so the huge issue that they're having in the legal system is, if that's the case, if you're saying that anything that is uncovered or encountered during a project that belongs to the people of Guam, then why am I having to fit the bill? And so that is what is being worked on right now, is trying to figure out.
Well, that and I have to say that is what most of us activists, I guess we call ourselves activists. Picking up your dog shit is being an activist. But the thing is, I mean, we're when you're proactive about your culture in this respect, okay, like when we collect artifacts to share with one another, because that's what a lot of us do. A lot of us that are pro our own culture, the Guam culture, Chamorro culture, that we try to share as much information as we can with one another, because what we are educated with in the public school system is very minimal, and then whatever extra is supplemental. It's like whatever I myself have put together, that I have put on video or on YouTube, or makes it to YouTube somehow, But the fact of the matter is, there's very little information out there that has been, that's a required understanding in public school. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, why not give them the whole thing? Give them the whole book.
Time.
Yeah.
But that's on the education. That's a whole. I'd love to take the time with that one, but it's just about a time.
I mean, it is. I mean, the stuff. I mean, there is a ton of information at the mark that you can go deep into Chamorro history if you were to just sit there and go through it all, or Guam history, period, or Mariana's history, period. And the thing is, I don't know. There's no way to fund it. There's nobody? It's not that nobody cares. People care. People want to do it, but there's no way to fund it. How are you going to fund? Where do you get funding to do indigenous type history? Like shorts. I don't know what you call them.
From a near socialist country is where you get the funding for that one.
Ed,
that's social services.
When I did that book with Ed, Iman Mananata, he's the one who dug the names out of the conquest of Spain, of the 25 names, and especially the others on the other side, I don't know exactly how many those were, but we did a book on it. And actually I think, it's time to republish that book, Anyway, but as far as artifacts, one of the things that I've heard through the grapevine, I'm not sure how true it is, but it really concerns me, is that a lot of construction sites are going to be fast-tracked, and in the way they are fast-tracked will be to bypass the archaeological data that needs to be done. That really bothers me, especially when we're trying to recover as much history as possible. We already have to deal with the way archaeology is dealt with military land, and that is ironed out very clearly in at the university level. They tell you straight out, if you get a military contract, you have 3 months. 3 months to grid where you're gonna do your digs, and get your information and get out, because we have to build our base, and that's how they explain it to you in college. When you're gonna get if you're going to be an archaeologist and you're going to get an archaeological contract on base, you have 3 months.
Well, I guess.
And you have to pick on that grid.
Yeah, but this is where
you think is correct, and if you are wrong, then you're wrong.
This is where knowing the laws help, right? And so
the laws don't matter when it comes to national security.
But they still matter in terms of funding. And so when you're no longer abiding by the laws, you might get away with it, but in terms of no incarceration repercussions, but you do run the risk of losing funding when you start sidestepping the rules and regs that are applied in situations like this. So in terms of this is... So,
that's what I mean. If they get the government to sidestep it, and they don't sidestep.
But when I hear things like that, then that scene in 40-Year-Old Version where they're asking him, they're talking about women, right? And then they're talking about boobs. And then Steve Carell feels like a bag of sand, right? Automatically, he's never touched the boob, right? I hear these, right? I hear these comments, and I understand that, yes, that's one side of what is going on. But if you don't know the real story, then you're going to sound like that. Felt like a bag of sand or a balloon filled with sand. And that's what this sounds like, right? Yeah. There's a federal requirement. It's called Section 110. And the federal government is required to survey the land that is not being used at the very current time, but they're planning on using it in the future, right?
Isn't that all of Guam?
Yes. It's called Section...
Whoa.
This is what they're supposed to do.
Mind blown.
So when you put on a 3-month... deadline to be covering an area, they should have already been covering the area as a result of following Section 110 requirements. And then that 3 months is to get any greater detail that they can.
Yeah.
That is due diligence. Whether or not they've done those due diligence, I don't know. But how the laws have been set up is for things like this to come into play, right? So yes, for somebody who's in that moment, that's doing the work at that moment, it'll look like it's just 3 months to do this. But if they're following protocol, which they should be following protocol, it is the military, right? If they're following protocol, then they've already been doing assessments and surveys of that area. It's required. It's required. It's required.
Okay. Well, I don't know. It's complicated. I don't know. We say it's acquired, but I mean, doing one thing, saying
due
another.
Diligence is another thing. But at least by law, it's required.
Because it's like at the cultural center, they tell us we got to go underground, but then all of a sudden they put power poles in Ipao Beach, to the main pavilion. It's like, did you just say we have to go underground? And if you go underground, that means a lot of archaeological surveys. And you guys are circumventing the system.
But what?
They don't like that term, circumventing the system.
What I am saying is, if they're not following the protocol, then that's room for litigation, right? If they're not following protocol. Just like in Hawaii, with the whole water contamination issue that they had with the military installation there. They weren't following protocol. They contaminated the water. Now, granted, the people had to take them to court, but they lost, and they had to clean it up, right? You know, begrudgingly, but they had to clean it up. If we, as a local populace, understand where they're not doing their due diligence, then we have a court case. Then we have something where we can win. And that's what I'm saying in these conversations about how these wheels and how these are the wheels are moving for this. If you see what's going on, if you see the template of what's being created, and you notice that there's something wrong there, well, that's when litigation will work. A lot of times we go to court and we lose because we're not seeing between the lines where it is. We're really good in terms of a technicality to free ourselves of any problems locally. But we also need to use those technicality issues that we have locally and apply them.
You're right.
On the federal side.
You're right.
You know, technically they're in default, right? Technically the military is in default because they're just a bad neighbor in terms of contamination and pollution.
I mean, one of my personal issues is this. You know, Chamorros, how many Chamorros do we know, or you listeners out there, you followers out there, how many of you are actually studying Old Spanish? Because really our documents are written in Old Spanish. You know, the conquest of Spain in the Marianas. You know, only maybe 15% at the very most, 15% of that is translated into English. Of that, 5% of that has anything to do with the Marianas. 5% of that has nothing to do with the cargo that came in and out, you know? And that's what you got of our history. And it's all very, very loosely translated, you know, Spanish. I mean, I need to thank Marjorie Driver, for doing all the original translations, especially of Fray Juan Pobre. That was very important. That translation was very important to me. Fray Juan Pobre was one of the few, if not the only, positive writings about my people I ever came across. You know, a lot of it is all negative. It's all we're a bunch of, you know, lesser than human people, you know. You know, that's how they, you know, we're savages. That's the way they wrote us, and it's, you know, it's a shame. Yeah, but there was more than that. And one of the things that gives me hope was one day, you know, I was a little disgruntled as someone growing up, you know, trying to learn about my history, and I, you know, came across this translator from, you know, for UOG, and I questioned him. You know, I go, so what have you translated for us at a conference? And he goes, oh, well, they handed me these documents from the 1700s and said translate it, and I tried. I looked at it, and I handed it back. I said, I cannot. I'm sorry. This is not in Old Spanish. And they're like, what? And says, yeah, it's not in Old Spanish, and it's not in Tagalog either. This is in another language altogether. So what that, I stopped, it made me think for a long while on that. And what I understood it to be was that it was in Fino Haza. They were counting in Fino Haza. We didn't even know that. Because we thought it was all in Spanish, because it was all in cursive. But now you have 1700s, 1800 Chamorros that are in the government system that are writing down things in their native language, but in cursive, and that's a trip in itself.
Well, you know, it makes sense. It makes
You
sense.
know?
It makes sense to me as a former educator and teacher of Guam history.
Yeah.
In my classroom, we went over the letter that the Chamorro population wrote to Congress, pleading for some kind of egalitarian status at the time. Right. This was in 1901.
Okay.
So the Marianas get ceded, or at least Guam in the Marianas get ceded over to the United States in 1898. So you're telling me 3 years later, you're going to be able to read and write English. Not just like simple English. We're talking high level English. It just blew my mind that in 3 years, and this is then when time moved slower.
They were multi-language
blew
people.
my mind.
They spoke Old Spanish, they spoke Chamorro, they spoke Filipino, they spoke English. It's 4 languages right there. Yeah, maybe a little German, maybe even a little German, because the CNMI had German government.
Yeah, my grandparents all spoke 3 languages. Tagalog, English, and Chamorro.
Yeah.
And my grandmother, who was the Chamorrita, spoke better Tagalog than my grandfather, who was the Filipino. And my grandfather spoke better Chamorro than she did.
And being able to speak all these different languages is very important, because you can see how their influences on the native language, was. I mean, like how much Filipino do we have in our language? We actually have a lot.
A lot of shared words.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And a modern one, like lumpia, right? I didn't know the rest of the world didn't call lumpia until I left.
What do they call it?
Egg roll.
Oh,
spring roll.
That's
anything
what
but lumpia.
Anything but
Except
anything
for Philippines.
Yeah.
Lumpia.
Well, yeah, we call it lumpia too.
We call it lumpia.
I didn't even think about it.
I thought the whole world called it lumpia, and
Even sing is the same word.
Sing?
Yeah.
What do you
Kanta.
mean? Oh, canta. Yeah. Canta. Canta. Because we have canta and chamarita, so singing in
that's the Spanish.
Talk about that. They were talking about that in the Patrick Palomo documentary today. I watched.
Oh, right
The
on.
museum. They had the guy, and he was singing, telling I think in Alahan.
Yeah.
I was singing down south, but up north they don't really sing it, and it kind of died out. So I was trying to revive it.
I had at the museum today. I had a couple northern Philippines women, roughly around my age, maybe a little bit older. They were they are taking a class, so they had to look at all the artifacts, and I showed them the kamzu, and they called it a name, and I couldn't figure out the name, but it was the term they use in Filipino.
What is it?
For kamzu.
What is it? Kamzu? No,
it's some maka, some shit.
Oh, I forget.
Anyway, but it's basically the same thing. It's just our origins are different. I don't know why. I don't know what it is.
Which origins?
For kamzu.
Oh, for the word kamzu.
For the word kamzu. So they have in the Philippines they have a different term for it. It's totally phonetically different.
What's the word kamzu for Philippines?
Yeah, now you're getting into it, right? Because you got to find out what part of the Philippines.
Yeah, it's in northern Philippines. That's for sure.
What tribe it was in the Philippines?
I was wondering if it was yours or near where your area was at.
I
so many ethnic groups.
Did know it at one point, but now it's like
But basically, it's
so many ethnic groups.
It's a coconut grinder. They call it a coconut grinder. So.
Some came from China. Some came from Indo.
They all the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just
like some guy gave it to them. All those.
We just took the best.
Yeah.
The best of 3.
I'll take this one.
Yeah.
Well,
so the kamsus are all made from. Yeah, we're
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay. So I want to say thank you again, Ian.
Thank you for your time.
Look us up for when we upload the pre-recorded stuff.
Yes.
And
clips.
We're going to record some more. Fama'kilo, Pachot Mu EP4 IAN.
All right. Thanks.
So just masi.